name's Gordon Dedman and welcome to another episode of Bushcraft Survival. Today we're going to be looking at how to make a fire using flint and steel. Flint and steel is a semi-primitive method of making fire. A lot of people think that flint and steel is one of these, a ferrocium rod, also known as a metal match. Now we've looked at one of these and how it works in an earlier episode. But a ferrocium rod is just simply a mixture of alloys and magnesium, which will produce a hot shower of sparks. That's not the kind of flint and steel we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be looking at a more traditional version of flint and steel. Now there are three main parts to our flint and steel set. We have our flint, some examples of different types of steel we can use, and our charcloth, and our tin that we make our charcloth in, and what we store our charcloth in. Firstly, looking at our flint. There are many different kinds of flint. Generally what we're after is a flint with a high silicon or silica content. This is English Brandon flint. A very good flint, obviously from England, and this is what was used for most of man's existence to make tools. It will produce a hot shower of sparks. Here is some chert, also a good example. This can be found in many different areas around the world. Also produces a good amount of sparks. This is a piece of quartz or quartzite. This is very common around the area where I am now. This will also produce a good shower of sparks. You're looking at some of the examples of our steels. This is more of a traditional shaped steel. All of these must be high carbon steel. You're going to get a great amount of sparks if it's a high carbon steel. Here's a more modern version of a piece of steel. Will still produce a nice shower of sparks. And here's a piece of steel I've made from a piece of fencing wire which I've tempered in the fire. Taken it, bent it into shape, and then tempered in the fire till it's red hot, and then immersed it in cold water. And that will produce a nice shower of sparks. A common, probably the most common form of steel is our file in a shed. This is high carbon steel and will produce sparks. Not as easily as those other ones did. In order to produce the best sparks, we really need a nice, almost 90-degree edge on our flint. Another example of a piece of steel is the back of our knife blade. And that's why in our kit we should be carrying a carbon steel knife, not stainless steel. You won't get sparks from a stainless steel knife blade, so it must be carbon steel. And we use the back of our blade, not the blade itself, or you're going to ruin your blade. And as you can see, that will produce a great shower of sparks. The sparks that we produce from flint and steel are very, very low in heat, very dull. If we were to put those sparks created from here straight into our tinder bundle, we're not going to be able to get that to ignite. So we need something that is going to be able to collect those sparks. And that something is charcloth. Charcloth is simply charred cotton. In order to make charcloth, we simply take cotton that's 100%. It must be 100% because if it's got any synthetic additives to it, it won't work. It could also be any plant fibres, which are obviously 100% natural. We take our charcloth, we stick them inside a tin, seal it, stick it on the fire, and what happens is that excludes all the oxygen and we're left with charred cotton. You make charcoal in exactly the same way. And we're going to look at how to make that very, very soon. Now it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. In order to make a fire, we need charcloth. But in order to make charcloth, you need a fire. So there are several different ways that we can actually strike our steel on our flint to ignite our charcloth. I'll show you a couple of those. What we do, we put our charcloth on top of our flint, position it, and then using a glancing blow, I strike down until a spark, hopefully, lands in the right place. As you can see there. That burns very, very hot. Before we start our fire using flint and steel, as always, I've cleared the ground down to bare earth, a 2-metre radius from the centre of my fire. I'm at my jungle camp here and I have my fire reflector which reflects heat and light back to my shelter. It also acts as a windbreak. As always, I have my set of parallel sticks and my different grades of kindling going from small to large. The tinder we're going to be using today is the cabbage tree palm fibre, which we've looked at in another episode, as well as the paper bark, which is from the melaleuca tree. So what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to buff my tinder up so it's nice and fibrous. And the way I'm going to light this, I'm actually going to use the back of my carbon steel knife. Yes, you can use any knife that's carbon steel is going to be fine. Bear in mind, it will take off the right angled edge on your carbon steel knife. So if you've got a good knife, that's a good thing for emergencies to use. If you have another source of steel, better to use that than your knife. However, for it works perfectly well, particularly in emergency. So I'm just going to use that now for the sake of my other knife. So all I do is I take my tinder, I place it down, I get a piece of flint, doesn't matter which one, angling my carbon steel knife blade at the tinder, being careful not to cut yourself on the upstroke. I strike that until we get an ember to land in the correct place, which we do. As you can see, we've got a couple of embers that have landed on that. Burns very hot. I put that into my tinder bundle. As you see, it doesn't take much at all. Turn it upside down because the flames want to rise upwards. Put that down on my platform of parallel sticks. I get my first grade of kindling and gently crisscrossing. I generally like to just lift those above the fire a little bit, just to let a bit of oxygen in so I don't smother it, and place those on top. Any small kindling I've got, I'll just go around and place that on top. Some leaves around here. Give that a second to take. Sometimes just lifting the sticks up like that just lets a little more oxygen come in underneath. Then I can place that down again. It's just understanding that fire triangle and how fire works. Once the flames come through the top, as always, we add our next layer of kindling. I'll crisscross that on top. Once the flames come through the top there, I'll add my next grade of kindling. I'd have another grade, but there's plenty of other wood to hand to add on after this. And for this grade, I'm going to go round in teepee fashion, sticking that on top. Now in Australia, we don't need a fire any larger than that. A lot of people have fires that are way too big. All that's doing is wasting fuel, and it's building a monument to yourself. It's completely unnecessary. Maybe in a colder environment, when you need to keep yourself warm, you would have a much longer fire, possibly the length of your body, and would have a different configuration of logs and wood for that matter. But that would be a warming fire to keep you warm. All I need to do is put a couple of larger logs on, no larger than that, and that's more than enough to cook on and to provide enough light for my camp. Any larger than that, it's just wasting fuel. This fire is established now. I can go and do other things. I can come and boil some water or other things around camp, and I know this is not going to go out. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode on how to light a fire using traditional flint and steel. My name's Gordon Dedman, and I look forward to seeing you again on another episode of Bushcraft Survival.